On the surface, Vermont looks almost perfect. Endless green forests, quiet small towns, and a way of life that feels far removed from the chaos of the outside world. But beneath that calm, something is slowly changing. Not an explosion, not a sudden collapse, but something much quieter, and in many ways, more concerning. In some small towns, jobs are disappearing. Shops are closing one by one. The streets are still there, but they feel emptier. Younger generations leave, and not all of them return. What remains are places that still stand, but no longer move forward. This is not about crime or disorder. It is about towns being slowly left behind. What happens when a town does not collapse, but simply stops living? In a state as picturesque as Vermont, with its green landscapes and clean air, Rutland often stands out for different reasons. This small city, with a population of around 15,500, was once an important industrial center, especially in marble production. Today, that legacy feels like it is fading. With a median household income around $57,000 and one of the higher crime rates in the state, Rutland faces challenges not commonly associated with Vermont's small towns. In recent years, it has also been linked to the opioid crisis, an issue that has slowly reshaped parts of the community. Downtown Rutland still exists, but it no longer feels as active as it once was. It is not a city that has collapsed, but one that is struggling to hold on to its identity. If Rutland feels like a fading industrial town, St. Johnsbury tells a quieter, more layered story. Located in northeastern Vermont, it was once a key regional economic center. Even today, signs of its past importance remain visible through historic buildings and cultural institutions that still stand prominently. But beneath that appearance, the reality is more complex. With a median household income around $53,700 and a poverty rate higher than the state average, the town faces real economic pressure. Some areas feel noticeably quiet, and local activity is not as strong as it once was. In recent years, St. Johnsbury has also begun dealing with social challenges such as homelessness and substance abuse, issues that are slowly emerging even in places once considered stable. The farther north you go in Vermont, the more beautiful the landscape becomes, and at the same time, the quieter it feels. On the Canadian border, Newport sits along the edge of Lake Memphremagog, offering views that, on paper, should be a major advantage. But behind that scenery lies a more complicated reality. With unemployment reaching around 10% and a median income below the state average, Newport's economy moves slowly. Its location at the northern edge makes it feel isolated, far from Vermont's main economic centers, and not large enough to generate strong opportunities on its own. Some local businesses continue to operate, but growth remains limited. Downtown activity is not as lively as expected for a border city. Even its proximity to Canada does not automatically translate into meaningful economic benefit. Known as the granite capital of the world, Barre once stood as a symbol of Vermont's industrial strength. For decades, the town was built around granite quarrying and production, shaping a strong and proud identity. But like many industrial towns, that era did not last forever. With a median household income around $65,000 and a relatively high crime rate for Vermont, Barre now faces a very different reality. The granite industry that once supported the local economy has gradually declined, leaving a gap that has been difficult to replace. Parts of the town still reflect its past: stone buildings, classic streets, and a strong historical presence. But there is also a sense that Barre is searching for a new direction, one it has not fully found yet. If Barre is still holding on to its past identity, Springfield shows what happens when that foundation is lost. Located in southern Vermont, this town was once a major manufacturing hub, even earning the nickname Precision Valley for its machine and tool industries. Today, that title feels like a distant memory. With a median household income around $46,000 and an economy that is not fully recovered, Springfield continues to deal with the long-term effects of industrial decline. Many jobs disappeared, and not all have been replaced. Old factory buildings still stand in parts of town, serving as quiet reminders of a busier, more prosperous time. Set along the Connecticut River, Bellows Falls at first glance looks like a classic slice of an old New England town full of charm and character. Rows of historic buildings, narrow streets, and a timeless atmosphere still feel very much alive. But the longer you look, the more a quieter, heavier side begins to emerge. The typical household earns around $56,000 a year, yet poverty remains noticeably high for a place this size. Many of its old buildings are still standing, but not all of them are occupied. Some sit empty, slowly aging without a clear purpose. Bellows Falls once grew as an important hub for industry and transportation, a place that had a clear role and direction. But like many small towns, time and change gradually eroded that role. Economic activity still exists, but it no longer drives the town the way it once did. Not every small town on this list feels harsh or bleak. Some, like Hardwick, feel more fragile, like a place trying to hold itself together under constant pressure. Typical yearly earnings here hover around $37,000, placing it among the more economically challenged communities in Vermont. But what truly defines its story is what it has endured in recent years. This small town was first hit by economic struggles, and then struck again by major flooding that damaged large parts of the community. The impact is still visible. Some areas have not fully recovered, and economic activity moves slowly. Yet, unlike places that feel like they have given up, Hardwick shows something different, a quiet resilience. There are real efforts to rebuild, to recover, and to move forward, even if progress is slow and difficult. On paper, Enosburg Falls is often listed as one of the worst small towns in Vermont. But when you actually look closer, it does not feel chaotic or visibly troubled. In fact, it feels the opposite, calm, almost too calm. Average household earnings sit near $50,000 per year, and unemployment is around 6%, reflecting an economy that is modest but not extreme. There is no major spike in crime, no sudden collapse of activity. What defines this place is something quieter, stagnation, slow, steady, and almost unnoticeable at first. Downtown still functions, but without much growth or change. Job opportunities are limited, and there are few reasons for younger generations to stay. Time seems to stand still here. That is what makes Enosburg Falls different. This is not a town that has collapsed or one in crisis. It is a town that has simply stopped moving forward, caught in the same rhythm, without a clear sense of direction. Not far from the Canadian border, Richford sits in a location that, on paper, should feel strategic. But in reality, the opposite is true. Its position makes this small town feel even more isolated. There is still activity here, but only on a very limited scale. The streets are quiet, local businesses operate just enough to survive, and real growth is almost non-existent. Unlike Enosburg Falls, which feels stagnant, Richford carries a heavier atmosphere, like a town that is not only standing still, but also struggling to move beyond its own limitations. Typical household earnings are around $52,000, and job opportunities remain limited, keeping the local economy slow. There are no major industries, very little new investment, and access to larger economic centers is not easy. For many residents, the only real path forward often means leaving. Unlike Richford, which feels closed off, Johnson still has a noticeable pulse, but it is not always consistent. Unemployment has at times climbed to relatively high levels, and typical household earnings sit around $48,000, reflecting an economic base that is not entirely stable. Much of the town's activity depends heavily on Northern Vermont University nearby. When students are in town, the place feels alive. But once they leave, the atmosphere shifts quickly. Local businesses rise and fall with that rhythm. Some manage to hold on, but others struggle to survive over time. Job opportunities outside the education sector are limited, narrowing economic options for residents. Johnson is not completely stagnant, but it is not fully growing either. Instead, it moves in cycles, busy, then quiet, then busy again. Lyndonville presents itself in a much subtler way. There is no harsh impression, and it does not look like a town that has clearly fallen apart. But the longer you observe it, the more it feels like this small town is moving without much direction. The population is small, and typical household earnings sit around $43,000, reflecting a limited local economy. Daily activity is still there, but only on a modest scale. There are no major industries, few new opportunities, and growth feels slow. Like Johnson, this town is also influenced by a nearby college, but the impact is not strong enough to lift the broader economy in a meaningful way. The streets feel calm, businesses operate just enough to get by, and change is barely noticeable over time. Lyndonville is not a town in decline, but it is not moving forward either. Northfield does not immediately feel troubled. At first glance, this small town appears orderly, quiet, and even relatively stable compared to others on this list. Much of that stability comes from one key factor: the presence of Norwich University. As one of the oldest military colleges in the United States, it serves as the center of life in Northfield, both economically and socially. But behind that stability, there are clear limitations. Much of the local activity depends on the campus. Outside of it, job opportunities are not very diverse, and the economy does not grow quickly. When campus life slows down, the town itself begins to feel quieter as well. Northfield is not experiencing a sharp decline, but it is not strongly growing either. It is stable but narrow, and over time, that kind of dependence makes its future feel limited. Not every small town on this list feels heavy or troubled. Randolph, in contrast, carries a lighter atmosphere, calm, orderly, and at first glance, perfectly fine. Typical household earnings are around $75,000, and with a modest population, the local economy remains steady, even if growth is minimal. There is no dramatic decline, but there is also little new development that truly changes the town's direction. Job opportunities remain limited, and like many small towns in Vermont, some of the younger generation chooses to leave in search of better prospects elsewhere. The streets feel active, but only just enough. There is movement, but not momentum. Time passes, yet without noticeable change. Randolph is not an extreme case of decline, but slowly, almost quietly, it begins to lose its own sense of appeal. The journey through these small towns in Vermont reveals something that is not immediately obvious on the surface. Not every quiet place is truly doing fine. Some of the towns we've explored are not the most dangerous, and they are not the most chaotic either. In fact, they seem ordinary. The roads are still there, the houses are still standing, and life continues, at least from a distance. But up close, the story shifts. The economy slows down, opportunities become more limited, and change arrives without a clear direction. In some places, what disappears is not just jobs, but the sense of a future to grow into. And that may be the most noticeable part. Not a dramatic collapse, but a slow process that almost goes unheard. These towns are not completely falling apart. They are simply being left behind. Yet even within that, something still remains. Small communities, people who choose to stay, and efforts, no matter how small, to keep these places alive. Because in the end, this is not just about towns. It is about what happens when time keeps moving forward. But not every place is able to move with it.